Kevin Anderson,
Present.
Justine Snyder,
Present.
Joseph Morrow,
Yes.
and Patrick Pitney. I am here. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Kevin Mizikar,
Present.
Alexandria Martinez,
Present.
and Angela, I don't have your name here, but I see that you're on, so you are present.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Matt Salad, Tecton Architects.
Here.
Justin Hopkins, Tecton Architects.
I think he's having some technical issues. He just logged off, but I anticipate him logging back
Okay,
on.
I see him on the list here, but Justin, when you get back on, just shout out. Neil Joyce, Construction Monitoring Services, Inc.
Present.
Thank you.
Good
evening.
Patrick Collins,
Yes.
and I'm in
Oh,
as well.
I'm sorry, Patrick. How did I miss you?
That's okay.
You were
Just
not
wanted to make sure.
You were not on my script. I've got to add you on.
Okay, no problem.
My bad. Thank you for noting that.
Sure.
Good evening. This open meeting of the Police and Municipal Campus Building Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. For this meeting, the Police and Municipal Campus Building Committee is convening by Google Hangout as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that you take care not to screen share your computer unless by the chairperson or the staff person. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by recording. We are now turning to the first item of the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each board or staff member who has the lead role for this particular item associated with the item on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members first and then to staff members, inviting each by name to provide any comment or questions. I will then call upon the members to offer a motion and then for a second. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Remember that unless a document is being shared, your camera feed is triggered by your speaking or background noise. To mute and unmute your telephone, dial *6. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For others in attendance that are expected to present, please hold until your name is called to present. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Remember that unless a document is being shared, your camera feed is triggered by your speaking or background noise. To mute and unmute your telephone, dial *6. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. After your presentation, members of the committee will be given the opportunity to ask questions. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And this meeting, I guess, is now called to order. That's a mouthful. Okay. First on the agenda is organization of the committee. We still need a vice chair, folks. I'm open for nominations. Do we have anybody?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Mr. DiPaolo to serve as the vice chair of the Municipal Campus Building Committee.
That was Joe Morrow for the minutes. Do we have a nomination? Do we have a second?
Second, that's Pat
Yeah.
Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on Mr. DiPaolo as vice chairman of the committee? There being none, we will now take a roll call vote. Kristen Lass,
Yes.
Keith Baldinger,
Aye.
Holly Luke,
Yes.
Kevin Anderson,
Yes.
Justine Snyder,
Yes.
Joseph Morrow,
Yes.
Maurice DiPaolo, and Patrick.
Yes.
And Patrick
Sorry.
Thanks, Mo. And Patrick Collins.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, Mo, and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, item 3 on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the June 15th, 2020 meeting. We all received it on the Google Drive. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? There being none, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Mo DiPaolo.
Do we have a second?
Second, Keith Baldinger.
We have a motion and a second to approve the June 15, 2020 meeting minutes. When I call your name, please respond with your vote. Maurice DiPaolo,
Aye.
Kristen Lass,
Aye.
Keith Baldinger,
Aye.
Holly Luke,
Aye.
Kevin Anderson,
Aye.
Justine Snyder,
Aye.
Patrick Pitney, aye. Joseph Morrow,
Aye.
and Patrick Collins.
Aye.
Thank you, folks. All right, now that the formalities are out of the way, we can get into the meat of the meeting, and that is the continuation of the presentation of the Police Station, Town Hall, and Senior Center programming. And with that, I guess we can turn this over to Matt, Justin, and Neil. I'm not sure in which order we're presenting, but I'm sure you guys have that worked out.
Thank you, Mr. Pitney. I'll start it off from here and share my screen to get started with the presentation. Bear with me for a moment. All right. Thank you for having us again to speak in front of you in this second part of this series of presentations on the findings thus far of the Police Station and Municipal Campus project. So I just want to recap where we were at our last meeting on June 15th. We introduced our team, Tecton Architects, along with your OPM Construction Monitoring Services, represented by Neil Joyce. We went through sort of the process that we had undergone as part of this early portion of the study, and briefly discussed the existing conditions of the police department. From there, Jeff McElravy took over and he started the discussion on the initial phases of the police station programming exercise. And from there, we were short on time, so we left off part of that presentation, which we will conclude this evening with the conceptual design study for the police department itself. And then from there, Justin's going to speak a little. I'm going to do a brief overview of the town hall just to get that into the record, and then we'll conclude that presentation subsequently at the next building committee meeting. And then Justin is going to take over and do a brief presentation on the conceptual design and study of the Council on Aging. So from the program that we had established previously with the police department and the town, we then have been working with the police department over a number of months to develop conceptual design floor plans, taking those spaces and organizing them in a way that becomes a useful floor plan moving forward. And I want to sort of stress that point that Jeff had made at our last meeting about those three primary user groups that encompass a police station. The detainees are prisoners, the public interface, and then the staff interface within the police department, and how those three blocks are isolated from themselves and flow throughout the building and out into the public. And then those three main population groups are then sort of centered around the central hub of the police station, which is the Dispatch and Communications Center. So this is the first floor. It's a two-story building as we've conceived it to this point. The plan is oriented, north is up. So the town hall and the senior center would be off to the right of your screen. This green area here is the main public portion. Orange represents the staff and dispatch spaces. And then this lighter shade of blue to the north would represent the prisoner processing, holding area, and Sallyport. The building is, again, organized around this dispatch center is the main hub of this building. There's two circulation spines that bisect the plan, north, south, and east and west. And these are primarily for interior circulation of many of the staff functions. We also create specific security points within the building to prevent the public from having free access to the rest of the facility. There's a lot of sensitive and secure areas within a police station, so we need to make sure that we segregate those areas appropriately. So this is the front of the building on the lower level. Again, the public areas to the front. So as you enter through the vestibule, there's the main lobby. Lobbies in police stations are typically dictated by the number of public interfaces and functions that happen within them. There's a lot of interaction points between different entities within the department and the public themselves. So we need to make sure that we have adequate doors and windows. Those take up wall space and thus defines essentially the lobby space itself. Additionally, we spoke in brief at the last presentation about the desire for some additional conferencing spaces within the police department that would be used by the public and town hall staff. Those public meeting spaces are flanking the vestibule off of the lobby to the front here. They're sized for about 18 to 20 people, so they're fairly large conference spaces. To the south of the lobby is the clerks and records area. So if you're ever going into a police department to make some sort of records request, there is a window here, a reception window, and that's where you would request and then receive those documents. To the north is the training room. This is a community training room that would be used for public events. It would also be used for staff training. There's a number of different training activities that go on at a police station. This would be used by the department and potentially other departments throughout the region. There's also public restrooms. This is sized for the training room occupancy load. So these are separate from the rest of the facility restrooms and open to the public. There's a desk officer at the front of dispatch. This is where you would go when you first come into the police department for general inquiries, directions, and this is basically your first point of contact when you enter the station. And then we have three interview rooms. So the first one is a licensing room. This is where you would go for your application for your pistol license. And then two other interview rooms. This is for if you're coming in to make some sort of complaint, domestic abuse report, things like that. This is where you come in and speak to an officer. There's a number of different interview rooms within a police department. They all serve different functions and have different populations that are coming in and out of them. This one is more for the public, so it's more off of the lobby. It's a more inviting space, and it's somewhere where the public regularly will interact with the police in a positive manner. Dispatch is, again, centrally located just off of the lobby. This is where all of your emergency communications, 911 calls are coming in and out, and all of your emergency services are going to be dispatched from. This has its own set of requirements and standards. It's under the standard of NFPA 1221, the National Fire Protection Association. And this is the national standard for the installation, operation, and maintenance of emergency communication systems. And there's some very strict requirements that go on with this in terms of fire ratings, communications equipment. And essentially, this space needs to be maintained and operational when everything else is really in jeopardy in case of fire or severe weather events. So it requires extra protection. Back of the dispatch center is the communications equipment room. This is the main server hub for the facility. This really needs to be located either below, above, or directly adjacent to the dispatch center. It's very expensive to have the amount of communication data wiring that goes between these two functions. So having it located adjacent to each other is a very cost-effective way to program the space. I should just add too, there's a future asset to the town that's also programmed here, and that's a 311 non-emergency communications call center. So we've added that into the plan for future use by the town. To the west of the building and to the south are a number of the staff facilities. Just cut off to the plan is the traffic division. You can see that on the previous slide. And then this is the patrol functions. So this is where a number of the on-the-road staff will be coming in and out, filing their reports. They have their lieutenant's offices here. There's one for each shift. There's 3 shifts to a police department in its 24/7 operations. And then we have the roll call or muster room. So this is where all the staff will come in and get their assignments during each shift change. To the north of the plan are the garages. They have a series of garages currently in the existing police station, and we would continue that function with the new facility. This would allow for general vehicle maintenance. It would also keep cruisers protected and out of the snow during inclement weather, which would reduce any safety issues with any of the officers that would have to leave the facility in a hurry to respond to any emergencies within the town. Housed within this as well is the ACO, the Animal Control Officer. They'll have an office here as well. And then the main staff facility here is the locker rooms, male locker rooms, female locker rooms, and then a fitness area. This fitness area can be subdivided into several different rooms, and it will be used for fitness training, tactical training, de-escalation training. It'll be a full multi-purpose space to really keep the department in top shape and performance. To the north of the plan is the prisoner processing area. This is where the uninvited guests will be entering the building. They come in through a secure access point here called the Sally Port. There's 2 bays here. The Sally Port is designed such that not only can a cruiser be brought in and then the doors be remotely controlled by dispatch so that an officer doesn't have to worry about any of those functions, but also that if there's a medical emergency with a prisoner or detainee, that an ambulance can come into the Sally Port, the doors can be closed and secured, and then the ambulance doors can be opened and the stretcher wheeled in. So that's sort of what justifies the size of this. It's larger than your typical garage, and that's the reason for it. Once a prisoner is brought in to the main processing area, they are brought into this holding cell. We have this backspace here just before the holding cell. That's a secondary picking area. So as a detainee is brought into the facility, they're able to be patted down and make sure that they don't have any evidentiary material still on their person that needs to be processed. While in the holding area, there's a transaction window between the processing desk and that holding space. This is where the breathalyzer test will be administered, fingerprinting will be done, and the general booking of that detainee will occur. We have 2 processing areas. This is for a larger influx of prisoners. If you have more than one coming in at a time, it's better to have them, have 2 separate processing desks so you can process them more quickly. And at the same time, if you have multiple arrests for a single incident, it's good to separate them and process them so that they're not able to corroborate stories, things like that. There's also an interview room. This is one of the other interview spaces. This is where you'll be speaking to your lawyer. You'll be speaking to an officer and interviewed during your processing. And then we have the cells to the south of the detention area. Right now, we have currently programmed 2 female cells, a handicap cell, and 3 male cells. This is sort of representative of what is currently there, based and combined with the metric of the number of arrests that you have per year. This is sort of in line with what we'd expect for a town and department of your size. Below the prisoner area is the evidence receiving, processing, and storage area. So as an officer processes a detainee, they would bring the evidence into this space here. This is where they bag tag and process the evidence. It goes into this evidence receiving and storage entry area. And then the evidence officer is the sole entity that takes it beyond that point. Chain of custody with evidence is a very important measure. If anything goes wrong with that, or there's tampering with the evidence, it can really cause an issue with a case, and a guilty person may end up walking innocent because of that. So we want to make sure that we're really taking care to address any safety and security issues when we're dealing with evidence. It's a large evidence room. We have high density storage in there. The reason being is there's a number of statutory requirements on evidence. Some of it needs to be retained for 20 years, and others need to be retained indefinitely as cases go on. So this is sort of one of those locations where storage kind of piles up, and we need to make sure we have the room to accommodate it. Moving up to the second floor, this is mostly administrative spaces and the investigative bureau. Most of the second floor is going to be rooftop, so it's not all going to be built out space. We are planning some additional storage that can be used as future expansion down the road as the department and the town grow. So as you come up from the north of the building, there's the main staff break area. This is for the entire facility. This is for basically all departments, and this is going to be the main point where all of these departments will be able to, have their break, lunch, things like that. We have an additional long-term evidence storage for some of that. Some of that evidence is going to be retained for 10, 20, and longer years as overflow storage. Again, we have an evidence passageway, so we have a second layer of security here to make sure that this has the same level of security as the main evidence room does downstairs. The investigative bureau is here. We have our detectives' open office space. They have a conference room. There's 2 sergeants' offices and a lieutenant's office. They also have a couple of storage rooms, one for general investigative equipment, one for crime scene processing and supply storage, and then a records room. They have a number of records. If you recall back from the existing conditions photographs that we showed here last time, one of those photos of the files was a number of those records. So there's quite a bit of records that get retained, just like evidence, for long periods of time, and we need to have the adequate storage space for it. Another set of interview rooms. So this is in addition to the interview room in the prisoner area. This is a little bit different, where this may be somebody coming off the street that you're bringing in for questioning that may or may not be incriminating themselves as they're being interviewed. So this is where you might be bringing in a suspect, or if you have multiple arrests downstairs, you might bring them into these interview rooms as well. So you're able to sort of separate them out and interview them simultaneously. In between those is an observation room where an independent detective can observe those interviews and have a second opinion as those are going on. It's always good to have a second set of eyes on these kind of things. Down to the south is the main administrative suite of the plan. So this is where you have the deputy chief, the chief, they have their admin, and then the admin sergeant is here that is in charge of the clerks down below. We also have a services division. This is like your school resource officer, things like that. And then they have a lieutenant and a sergeant as well. And then again, the storage space up here. We have a second locker room up here for the administrative staff and the detective staff. This has a couple of functions. One, the nature of investigative policing could require some of those detectives to be on staff for multiple days on end as they're investigating a crime. So they need a place where they can go and clean up and store some of their own equipment. A lot of this isn't really a duplicative space, because if we had it downstairs at the locker room there, that locker room would actually grow. So this is really just taking part of that function and moving it closer to their office space as well. So that's basically the layout of the police department. So once we finish the presentation, we'll take more comments on that. Also, at the end of the presentation, we have the previous slide deck from the last meeting. So if there's any questions on any of the previous material, we could address that as well. So now I just want to talk briefly about town growth and show some of the justifications for some of the growth that we're showing in the police department, what you'll see in the town hall, and then that'll sort of lead into how the program was informed. So this is showing on the left the basic data for the building when it was constructed, when it was renovated in its square feet. So the town hall was constructed in 1966 and renovated in 97 with an addition. Its current size is 36,319 square feet. And what you'll see in the brief overview of the town hall next is that we're proposing a modest addition, bringing the total program square feet up to 44,000 square feet. The police station, constructed in 1971 and renovated in 96 with an addition, is 17,485 square feet, and the program square footage is 38,438, and that's reflective of the floor plan that you had just seen. The senior center was constructed in 2000. There's not much growth in the program, and what you'll see when Justin presents is that we're not proposing a lot of changes to the size of the building, but just the organization of the building to better address the programmatic functions and how that building is used for more efficiency. So the existing square footage is 11,400 and the program square footage is 11,835. And you'll see how that is addressed with the conceptual floor plans later on in the presentation. So this is, the graph on the right is a snapshot of the 10-year census data with projections to 2050, which is what we are programming to in a conservatives fashion, versus the population data. And you'll see that there's been a 10-year average trend of 7% growth within the town. In 1950, you were just under 10,000 residents. Today, you're just around 35,000. So that has been a pretty consistent growth year over year. And so we would expect that trend to continue. And that's why we need to make sure when we're programming these facilities that we're not designing them for the population and staff of today, but really planning for an understanding of how these are going to grow in the future. And equally to that growth, we've seen the same in town administration and the police department. Now, the Council on Aging is a relatively new asset to the town, as is the building, so we haven't seen the same growth there, and we wouldn't expect that. But the town hall staff, we didn't have the data back from 1950, but we did from 1990 and projected that out as well to 2050, and they both showed 26 or 27% as a mean growth line over a 10-year period. So consistent growth in both the town office staffing levels as well as the police department. And again, as town population grows, we would also see that trend line continue. So this population drives the number of people in the building. Number of people in the building drives the program square footage. So I'm going to give just a brief overview on the town hall because we're going to discuss the master plan in brief as well. So the main points with the town hall is the staff size is growing, so the building needs to grow. It hasn't really been touched in almost 30 years, but yet the staffing levels have grown significantly since then. So it's getting tight. What we've proposed here, and Jeff is going to come back at the next meeting and go into more detail on the program in this layout. But basically, we're able to make a more efficient use of the space by reorganizing where some of the departments are housed within the building themselves. So treasurer and accountant are now in the center of the plan. They would sort of move down towards the police station portion of the town hall. But most of these are fairly modest renovations. What we are doing is we're proposing this yellow block as an addition to the town hall, and that would house the school department. Currently, they're housed in a couple of different facilities throughout town with a portion of their administration in the town hall themselves, which is where the accountant and the treasurer are being proposed to move. In order to accommodate the staff growth through the town hall itself, as well as the centralizing of the Board of Education and school department, this addition would accommodate all of those staff with room for growth in the future. The second floor is currently where the public facilities offices are. We're maintaining that location with some renovation work to accommodate their staff growth as well. So not giving them more square footage, but just making a more efficient use of the space so that they can continue to operate in an efficient manner. So just briefly on the campus conceptual master plan, this is sort of how the things are envisioned to lay out. So this is just a brief overview. Off to the left, this is where the police station is going to be proposed. Just faintly in between the new police station and the town hall, there's a lightly dashed area. That's where the existing police department is. This location was determined based on a number of factors. One, that blue circle to the north of the police station proposed location is wetlands. Based on the GIS data versus what we've surveyed or what the town has surveyed, that wetland area has grown significantly from what was initially assumed. So that is partially dictating where the location is, that and a general lack of other space on the campus itself. Now, that red dotted line that's bisecting the police department from the rest of the campus, that's the property line. It's dividing the town hall campus that's currently planned here with another town-owned property. So it would just be a matter of incorporating those two properties into a single one. The police department currently comes into the site the same way as the public. So there's a lot of congestion created by that and security issues between police cruisers crossing public traffic. So for safety, security concerns, we've added a secondary drive for the police department staff separate from the rest of the campus. And that circulates to the back of the police department for their staff parking. In the middle of that bank of parking here, we would also propose a parking canopy to cover some of the additional overflow cruisers that we couldn't fit into the garage, again, to keep them under cover. It's better to keep them dry and safe so that officers, when they need to respond to an emergency, don't have to get out there in a snowstorm and start cleaning cruisers and delaying their response. So over here to the north also is the Sally Port. So as a prisoner is brought into the site, this is where they would be brought in and processed. We have public parking to the front of the police department as well. And then the rest of the campus has basically been a plan in making a more efficient vehicular and pedestrian circulation pattern. Right now, when you go and visit, there's just a sea of cars and there's a lot of drives that are sort of wherever they could fit, and it creates a little bit of confusion. So by simplifying the vehicular circulation pattern, we're able to make a more efficient use of the parking area, and we're able to increase the parking load. We're actually getting, for the campus itself, about 90 additional parking spaces, which is very needed because if you've ever been there on a weekday, it's very crowded on the campus. Currently, where the town hall addition is going, there's the landscaped area that's operated by the garden club. We're creating a new island out here in the front of the campus that would be a little bit more visible to the public, and that would be then given over to the garden club as well. So this would be a new landscaped feature within the property. We're removing the drive that currently comes in at the west of Town Hall, and we're shifting it down to the new police department location. This takes the green that's in front of the Town Hall and actually doubles the size of it and increases that usable footprint. And then we clean up the vehicular circulation off to the senior center here. So it's a little bit more of a linear traffic flow. We increase the parking to this side of Town Hall for staff parking, and we've added additional parking spaces for the senior center as well. One thing we talked about last week was or that we'll address shortly, is that one of the issues with the senior center is a lot of the outdoor activity spaces are off to the north and are secluded away from the rest of the campus itself. And they're divided from the senior center by a lot of the utilitarian spaces that are located here, dumpsters, transformers, things like that. So what we've actually done is created a new, sort of remove the drop-off area that's at the front of the senior center and created a new area for the bocce courts, outdoor recreation, a pergola, and outdoor seating area to the front here, so that it's better connected to the campus and less connected to the properties to the north and to the east. And what you'll see in the new conceptual plans is we're also creating a new entryway, a better defined entryway here for drop off, and that's sort of what this drive is serving here. So with that, we'll jump into the senior center, and I'll turn it over to Justin Hopkins. This is his first time speaking with you guys, so he's an associate with Tecton Architects, who's been working with us on this project as an expert in senior center and town hall programming and design. and he will walk us through the senior center design now.
Thank you very much, Matt. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
So here are some, this is part of the existing conditions report. What you'll see are some images of the existing senior center. The top left-hand image is the existing pickup and drop-off area to the south of the building. This is part of the area that we're proposing reclaiming as some recreational space, so that some of our open spaces that are to the north and the east of the existing building will now be towards the south. Nice south light, and also kind of an active front of the building that is directly accessible from the parking spaces. The other images are from around the building. The bottom left-hand image is our service entry, which is around the north of the building. And as Matt had mentioned, this is what essentially bifurcates the parking area from some of the exterior recreation space, which is to the two images to the upper right and the lower right on your screen. Next slide, Matt. Okay, some interior images of the offices. So as we were going through our walkthrough with Holly and looking at some of the proposed requirements for future staffing levels, obviously a organized flow of administrative offices and group offices as well as meeting space was very important. And this is kind of the group work area within the existing senior center. Another space is the drop-in lounge that you're looking at it from the check-in location. This is really the area that we are going to propose working with in order to reclaim some program space. It's underutilized. Our opinion is that it's an underutilized space, and I think Holly would agree with us that it's a large space with a lot of opportunity, but it's very difficult to program activities within. And as you can see from the photograph below, there's any number of activities that could be going on simultaneously within the space. This is the multi-purpose room and the commercial kitchen. Obviously, the large multi-purpose space can be subdivided into two smaller multi-purpose spaces to allow some flexibility for additional programming and scheduling of events or activities. One of the things that was brought up in our interviews was the idea of having a drop-in cafe, or a cafe that would be able to be used and utilized by the seniors and the clients in the facility as like a kind of like a continental breakfast kitchen. So pastry station, coffee station, drinks, something that wouldn't require them to go into the larger, more formal kitchen, where often your Meals and Wheels are being staged there, and other large meals are being staged there. So some things that we discovered through programming, and this is part of the existing conditions report. Overall, the building itself is in good shape, okay? It's a 20-year-old building, so it shows some signs of natural wear and tear for a 20-year-old building. But overall, good condition, has been well maintained. So some of the ongoing maintenance items are to be expected for a building of its age. Some minor cosmetic improvements in the exterior, painting, caulking, roof replacement will be coming due within the next 5 to 10 years. We do have a recommendation that you beef up some of the insulation to allow better flow of stormwater off of the flat portions of the roof. But as far as programming goes, lack of multi-purpose space, you do have a large multi-purpose space that can be subdivided into two, and you have a crafts room. Beyond that, your only other program space is the drop-in lounge. So the ability to have flexible rooms that can serve different activities and programming throughout the week is proposed. Lack of office space, your veteran services agent currently shares space on Thursdays. I believe it's Thursdays, Holly, you can correct me if I'm wrong when we get into comments. But 1 day a week, which causes some scheduling issues with the current staff. So providing a new office space for your veteran services agent. As we mentioned, the underutilization of the drop-in lounge, and also your toilet access. It may sound, this is a common complaint that we hear in senior centers, is the distance that seniors need to travel to the bathroom. Sometimes if the bathroom entrances are located at one end of the building, it can become a problem if there's an activity that's at the other end of the building. So your plumbing fixture counts are just fine for the senior center, but looking for the opportunity to provide additional access or closer access to the toilet rooms and the restrooms in the building is something that was something that we wanted to look at. So I believe the next slide is the existing, so this is the existing senior center floor plan. So the areas in blue are your staff areas. You have a conference area all the way to the left. The lower left-hand corner is your central office and 2 private offices. As I had mentioned, your major program spaces are the main hall that's in the upper right. You can see the commercial kitchen that's off of that with your service entry. Main hall can be divided into 2 smaller rooms. Your craft room is in the bottom right-hand location on the plan, and your drop-in lounge is that large green rectangle that's the area that we're going to look at to try and get some smarter program space. Your toilets are geographically located in the middle of the floor plan, but access to them is all the way to the right. So somebody that's in the main hall or the craft room needs to travel down the corridor to get to the entrance of the bathrooms. We're going to try in our concept plan to still utilize that location of the bathroom, but provide an additional entrance into the room. So it's a little bit located closer to your main program space. So one other thing to note, your vestibule that's in the bottom center of the floor plan, that's your existing pickup and drop-off area, your existing front door, if you will. If you recall our conceptual site plan, we're now proposing that the vestibule and the entrance all the way to the left of the floor plan will be your new front door. So locating reception, check-in towards that location will allow for a proper sequencing through the space. You check in, you get to your programs, as well as try to provide some occasional soft seating that is an amenity of the drop-in lounge, but we think we can provide it in a slightly more intimate scale and setting. So with that, here is a concept plan. The areas in light blue are our administrative spaces, our staff location. The areas in green are our new multi-purpose spaces. So starting to the left, we're showing the opportunity for potential covered pickup and drop-off area all the way to the left of the entrance, our new front door. As you come in, you can either go to the reception counter to the right, or you can go to the veterans office to the left. So from there, the veterans services agent has a degree of autonomy as well as his clients. It's not always the same clients that though there are duplications in folks that use the senior center and the veteran services, there are sometimes different clients. So having a kind of autonomous location that somebody can come and meet with the Veteran Services agent is a priority. Okay, off of the front desk and reception, we have an open office and we have 3 private offices. So we're increasing that count from 2 to 3 in that area and increasing it in total private offices from 2 to 4. And we are also reclaiming some of the outdoor storage area that's up in the upper left-hand portion of the floor plan for our new conference and training area. This is more of a classroom. It's a larger conference area, and it can be either a large conference room or a classroom. So that is kind of a multi-purpose flex room for both staff and public use. More or less, we keep our main hall and our kitchen intact. So that seems to work well now, as well as the Meals on Wheels out to the service, access to the Meals on Wheels drivers. Your craft room in the bottom right-hand portion of the floor plan works well also. So our 2 new multi-purpose spaces are basically within the zone that your existing drop-in lounge are. And we gained 2 pretty good size, I would call a small multi-purpose room and a medium-sized multi-purpose room. And our scale reference is the main hall rooms are your large multi-purpose rooms. So adding these rooms allows for the flexibility in programming for, say, cards, for separate evening meetings, after hours meetings, yoga classes, additional crafts. They will greatly increase the amount and the quantity and the type of programs that you can have at the senior center. So in the space that's left over, we view this as kind of the main street, if you will. If our corridor is a main street, we would have a drop-in lounge that's in the light version directly opposite the main doors into the main hall. And immediately to its left, we have some built-in shelving for library, and as well as some soft seating. So the opportunity that just off of the corridor, we would have some occasional seating that is also some public book storage, periodicals, and our drop-in cafe. All are kind of in the center of the physical building. We're also opening up a corridor to our toilets. So directly across from the drop-in cafe and the soft seating, we're creating a secondary corridor that gets us into the toilet, both the men's and women's toilet room, which provides entry to those locations at a more central spot within the floor plan. So what this does is, as I had mentioned in our opening comments, we have the proper amount of toilet fixtures for this size of the building. So just providing an additional access to the bathroom is how we achieve the distance deficiencies of the overall toilet rooms. So by repurposing, in summary, by repurposing some of the existing space within the existing building, we're able to provide 2 additional program rooms, multi-purpose rooms, 2 additional private offices, as well as some of our resolve some of our circulation issues to the existing toilets, and provide an additional drop-in cafe for the seniors to use. I think that's the general overview of where we are for this scheme.
Thanks, Justin. So that is a lot of information over the past 2 meetings. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions and comments. So I think I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Pitney. And any slides you want me to return to for reference, just let me describe the slide and I can move back to it. And as I stated before, excuse me, I do have the slides from the last presentation that we can reference.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Justin. A very thorough presentation. For everybody out there, I'm not going to go down the roster here and ask each person if they have a question or a comment. If you do have any questions, and I have several, if you just raise your hand, I will find you and call on you. That'd be the easiest way. And I see Mr. DiPaolo. Mo, why don't you lead us off? You're on. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Matt, a couple of questions on the police station. Is the dispatch area size big enough to do a future regional dispatch area?
Here, let me go back to that plan. So the short answer is likely no. It's something that we had discussed a number of times. Understanding exactly seats are going to be in a regional dispatch center is hard to determine, and it's a conversation we have with many departments at this point. Everybody seems to want one, but nobody seems to really pull the trigger to execute that. Dispatch areas are very expensive square footage. Planning this to have an additional 4 to 8 seats would be a large cost for what we would hope would come to fruition, but may not come to fruition. I think what we would anticipate is if we went to a regional dispatch, that there would be an additional standalone facility to accommodate that, or build out something else on the second story.
Just to follow up on that, the first floor area can't be built in a way that space could be expanded. I mean, if you move it upstairs, it's a very expensive move as opposed to making the dispatch room larger on the first floor. You've got a lot of the wiring and the utilities there already. I know you need a lot more, but I agree with you that everybody talks about regional, and a lot of places don't do it. But I think we're interested in that. So I mean, I could talk to Kevin offline about it, but it would seem like we'd want to anticipate it as much as we could. So I can talk to Kevin about it offline if you want.
Mo, if I might add, I think it would be helpful to us if we had an idea of how much additional space you would want. And then I think we could perhaps bring some flexibility into the first floor plan, understanding that might mean building out some space on the second floor that perhaps isn't finished or would otherwise be utilized in the interim.
Yeah, I'll talk to Kevin because I know we're trying for the grant for that, and I just think we're better off planning for it now. The worst thing that happened is we wouldn't use it and we'd have some extra space. So that was just one thought. My only other thought is there a reason the evidence room on the first floor can't be on the second floor?
The short answer, well, the easiest answer is, and I'm Lieutenant Anderson, I'm sure you can weigh in on this, is the people that are bringing the evidence in typically aren't always the detectives. So bringing it up to the detectives area would take them on a circulation path that they wouldn't typically go on. You really don't want that evidence to be traveling through the facility by somebody who isn't the evidence officer. So the quicker you can get it from prisoner processing into that storage room, the less time it's handled by somebody that isn't supposed to be handling it is ideal.
Matt,
Okay,
I can comment on that as well if you'd like.
Yeah.
Sure, Kevin.
Kevin Anderson here. Yeah, Mo, you really don't want evidence to be traveled far within the building. The shortest distance possible is best. So typically it comes in at a rest. So near the booking room is probably the best location for the evidence room. We have it on the second floor now, and you got to go upstairs. You got to make a separate trip to bring it up. I think having it at the location that most likely it's going to be next to is the best spot.
Okay, that makes sense, but maybe I misunderstood. Is that if you have to hold evidence long-term, does it get moved upstairs?
Yeah, that would be the stuff upstairs. Believe it or not, that evidence room, the way it's laid out, I don't know if Matt went over it, but they're these moving, what would you call them, Matt? Like closets?
High density storage, like you would see in a library or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just rolling.
Medical records.
You could actually hold a lot of evidence on that first floor. The second floor would just be for items that are really large that don't fit in there, or items that have to be held for 20 years or 15 years, something like that, long-term storage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I see Joe.
Chairman Pitney.
Thanks, Mo.
Mo, you want?
I think we'll move to Joe Morrow. Joe, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to kind of echo on the dispatch because I had a few questions on those, like Mr. DiPaolo said. And the question was, what is the future going to bring for the dispatching for the community, whether it's going to be regional based, are you going to do police fire dispatching? And if you had enough stations there. I did notice in the space needs assessment, it did, you were going to use the training room as a backup EOC, and I don't know what type of communications for emergency operations centers this dispatch center would serve, but I kind of look at it, future expansion, the bigger the better, but again, I don't want to get too much into it because I don't know what the town's plan is as far as police dispatching, fire dispatching, regional police, regional fire dispatching, so I'll just leave that to you guys to do.
So I'll just to clarify a few points on that.
Yep.
So this is police, fire, EMS. This is your everything that's emergency services is dispatched here. They also will have pretty much all security cameras and things like that throughout the town will be able to be monitored here as well. Any emergency notifications that need to go out to anybody, to the schools, this is where that'll happen. It's my understanding that there is already an EOC in town. So during storm events and things like that, if there's anything that would happen there that would be an issue or there's overflow that's required, this would be the secondary or even the third EOC in town, I think. So this would be the same as any other EOC. It would take all personnel that would be required from the town, DPW, police, fire, EMS, town administration, whoever needs to be in the room for any of those emergency services would have operations here. So there'd be a number of phone data, monitor displays, things like that to monitor any sort of emergency situation, and that would go here.
Any follow-up, Joe?
No, that clarified that. The only thing I would say is again, I was on the Public Safety Building Committee in Southborough for the police and fire station, and I know there was, and I'll have to look into and find out, when the state 911 came in, they had a hookup, an additional hookup. So if something ever happened in the building, there was a fire or a flood and you couldn't use the dispatch center, there was a quick hookup connection that you could put in there and pretty much hook into the radio communications and keep that up and running. So that's something to consider. I'll find out more about that. I can get back to the committee on that as well.
Yeah, that's something that we can provide. There's a number of different sort of backup emergency systems that we'll have in here. One of those can be a backup dispatch center. So basically they would roll in with a mobile dispatch unit and hook that up into the building. The other one is part of that National Fire Protection Standard, NFPA 1221, is that this building is going to not just have a generator for getting you over the hump when you lose power for a couple of hours. We have a requirement that all emergency portions of the building in critical operations are going to be on 72 hours of emergency generation. So there's going to be a large generator so that the building can operate for 3-day runtime in case something like the October snowstorm was to happen again. Because this building, even if the rest of the buildings in town go down, lose power, have issues due to a weather event, this one needs to be maintained. We can also do a secondary hookup so that a mobile generator can come in to supplement if you're out for 2 or 3 weeks. So there's a few redundant systems that can go into this to make sure that we're building resiliency.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Is there anybody else out there with a question? I don't have everybody up on video. I'm not sure that I'm using Google Hangouts correctly, but is there anybody else out there? Okay, not hearing anything. I do have a couple questions. Matthew, thank you. You answered my question on dispatch. I was curious about the generators and how we extended that. So thank you for that. But I guess I just have a general question based on the changes in the world over the last 4 months. How is the design or the processing changed based on, number one, COVID-19, and number two, the protests that are occurring around the nation and how they might affect the police station and how it functions?
Yeah, that's a good question. Changes in the sort of the public and emergency response due to any sort of event always sort of changes the way that these facilities operate. The biggest paradigm shift in police station design was not what happened right after 9/11. So those sort of events always inform the way that we design these facilities. COVID-19 is no different. Civil unrest is no different. That's something we've always dealt with police stations, right? So a building is brick. Police station is typically brick, not just because it fits the community character of a typical New England town, but because it's intrinsically bullet resistant. We also do things like, it's one of those things you don't like to talk about because you don't want to have some sort of incident happen at a police station, but the entire public interface between the public and the rest of the private functions of the facility are going to have bullet resistant walls to them. So they're actually, depending on what material we use, we typically use Kevlar lined resin impregnated panels. A lot of words for a fancy word for bullet resistant panel. And they go into the wall so that if somebody does get in the lobby wishing to do harm, that they can't. All of those windows, all those transaction windows are also going to have the same sort of protection. Additionally, there's specific fire ratings that we do. We fire rate specific areas above what's required by the code because you never know what's going to happen in these facilities, and they need to operate, and you're dealing with people that really need to be protected because they're the ones protecting us, right? This is also what's considered by the building code as an essential facility. Fire, EMS, things like that house these essential services that are meant to protect the public have a higher requirement by the building code. So this is what's called a risk category 4 structure. Because of that, the building is designed to the seismic loads that you would never really encounter as far as earthquakes, but also the wind loads that this building will experience. We actually designed that for something that you would have for out on Martha's Vineyard, because this building, again, needs to be standing and be that much stronger than anything else. So what we do a lot of what we call target hardening, things like that, to make sure that it's safe. We do things out on the site to make sure that, there's a long straight drive going down the site right into the building. So we're going to have bollards, passive protective features with concrete planter walls and things like that to make sure that you can't take a truck or a vehicle and drive into the building. These are the crazy things that we have to think about. As far as COVID goes in pandemic response, we've actually been discussing this with a number of our police and fire chiefs that we've been working with. And one of the main issues that we've been seeing is the disruption of the administrative services and their disconnection with the rest of the department. A lot of chiefs are having to work from home because you can't risk the administrative staff getting infected, as certain staffing levels raise and drop because certain employees are getting infected. One of the fire stations that we're working on now, one of the firefighters got infected with COVID, and the entire 19-person shift had to get quarantined for 2 weeks. So staffing levels become a huge issue with that. So making sure that the administrative function can still happen so that the police department can still operate is important. So separating different parts of that. Let me go to the plan on the second floor real quick. One of the simplest ways we're doing that is as you come into the investigative suite, this is a public lobby essentially for investigative. If you're coming to talk to any of the detectives, same thing if you're coming to talk to the chief. They have their admin staff, and their admin staff is going to be behind a protective wall inside of an airlocked vestibule. So if somebody is coming in, you don't know if they're infected or not with some sort of pandemic, COVID-19 or whatever's in the future. So we're making sure that they're completely separated from them if a pandemic is going on, so that you can isolate that kind of thing. But those functions can still go on.
Sure.
We're dealing with different ways that the HVAC systems are circulating. We're enhancing the filtration. That's a lot of this is research that's still ongoing. UV sanitation is a big thing that's being looked into. So whether or not you're using increasing outside airflow in the HVAC system and reducing the amount of recirculated air so that you're not recirculating virus, and then putting the potential for UV light as a disinfectant treatment for any air that is recirculated. People are looking into UV sanitation for room disinfectant. These are all things that are sort of top of mind, but the research is ongoing. So I think that answered your question. There's a lot of things that are going on.
I've seen some of those UV machines. I think they start at $100,000, but they do work. They seem to work anyway. I did also have a question, and probably part of it is my ignorance on this type of thing, but could you talk a little bit about the Sally Port, and is this typical for this size department and for this size town? Because I'm just not that familiar with them, since we don't have one in town right now.
You do have a Sally Port now. It's not.
Oh, we do. Well, see, there you go. Okay. Yep. So are we just making it bigger?
Yeah. So now, the one that you have now isn't large enough to bring an ambulance in a secure. Actually, Lieutenant, can you even get an ambulance in the existing one? You have to back it up to it, don't you?
Yeah, you can't get any back. We've had trucks actually hit the top of it, so it's damaged.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 Sally Ports for a town this size is the average, I would say. Yeah. We did 2 Sally Port bays in just south of you, and that's a significantly smaller.
Okay. Would there be room for expansion if we needed to on that? And
there will, yes.
Okay.
So we would have to redo the parking a little bit, but there is room to expand to the north.
Okay. And I guess my last question, I'm going to go off the police station a little bit. I have a question on the senior center. So I guess this might be for Justin. When I read the feasibility report, it showed that in the main lobby, that one of the concerns was that there was only one exit point if there were a need for an evacuation. And when I looked at when I saw that your presentation with the design, it didn't seem like that changed. It seems like there's one exit to I gotta call it the northwest side of the building, and the other 2 exits go out into the corridor. My concern is that if you had a fire or something like that, there's only one exit in that main room.
So, yeah, Matt, can you go to the floor plan? Yeah. So, yes, this is something that we're going to have to take a look at. The issue is that when your main hall folding partition is open, you have more than the required means of egress there. You have a spot out the back, and you have 2 doors that go out to the corridor. When you have the folding partition closed, in the left portion of the room, the divided room, You only have two means of egress out. One is into the corridor and one is through the kitchen and through the entry. It's not necessarily what the code intended when it says that you're allowed to egress through adjoining spaces. So there is a provision in the code that allows you to exit through an accessory use space. Typically, that kitchen would not be considered an accessory means of egress. So if we go to the next, the proposed space, proposed plan, Matt, what we're doing is we will want to look at a little bit more the remoteness of the means of egress, but we would be providing corridor access on the same wall of that the kitchen door is on into the toilet alcove, the toilet entry. But there are a couple ways that we can get through that. We can put an additional door in the exterior wall to the north of that room. We can also provide a door within the folding partition. Sometimes they'll make a panel that allows you to go through. So those are things, as this gets closer, we'll certainly want to make sure that we're compliant with all the means of egress requirements. But that was the only one that I think that we had enumerated in the existing conditions report.
I think so. Yeah, my concern is that, the number of people that are in that room, the population we're serving there, and then the distance that they may have to travel.
Yep,
in
absolutely.
the wake of an emergency.
Yes, good catch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for right now. Anything else out there?
Mr. Pitney, I did have just two brief questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Collins.
For our architects, I'm just wondering, I know and I understand and appreciate all the universal best practices and design of police stations that you brought to bear here. I'm just curious about if you could just talk a little briefly about what level of input you had with police department personnel and what levels of input that they were able to impact the current design that you have right now for Shrewsbury specifically. And then secondly, I probably missed this, but is there anything with regard to any kind of covered bays or storage for part of the fleet of vehicles just to protect those assets from weather?
So I'll answer the second question first. So aside from this garage here, which I believe will hold 8 to 10 vehicles, we also have this parking area here that we would propose a parking canopy over. And this would be suitable for most of the fleet to have under cover.
Okay.
As far as the input of the department, we had many meetings with the chief and the lieutenants with the department early on in our programming sessions. From there, as we refined the program and the plan, the chief and I had a number of, we were talking probably 2 or 3 times a week about various modifications as he was communicating with the rest of his department. And then basically he would direct his staff to discuss with me any of their specific requirements. So I had, discussions with, the animal control officer, Lieutenant Anderson and I had many conversations about the department as well. So those conversations will be ongoing, but we did speak with a number of the staff on many occasions.
Very good. Thank you.
Anything else, Pat?
Nope, that'll do it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm looking at the clock right now. Mr. Joyce, I know you have to leave us for another meeting in a few minutes. Is there anything you want to add, or do you have anything to present, or any comments? Or
I don't, truthfully. From a process perspective, I think that there's been numerous discussions, both online as a team and also offline, kept on in the various departments. And I think that overall the process has been very smooth and very thorough.
very good, thank you. So I guess if there are no other questions out there, I guess my next question would be, what's next in the process?
Pat, Mark Paulo,
Sure,
I
Mo.
thought we were going to do one building at a time, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just, I have a couple of questions about the senior center. I guess if I could to Holly, does this tie into the strategic plan that was developed?
To redo the building?
Yes.
So part of the strategic plan was definitely to utilize the space more appropriately. As Justin mentioned earlier, there's a lot of wasted space, which prohibits us from doing the programming that we want to. So I would say yes, it definitely ties into the strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. If I could ask another one, Mr. Pitney.
Go ahead, Mo.
Justin, moving the entrance to the side it is fine, but I'm looking at this plan and to me it doesn't look open and inviting to come in, and it looks almost like an office building with a long hallway. Not a lot of open space in there. You know, it's hard to tell from the size of the plan, but that side entrance definitely looks really small. If people are going in with a wheelchair or something like that. How big is that room?
The vestibule to the left,
Yeah,
it is smaller than the larger vestibule to the south, but it's compliant for both accessibility and means of egress. I would say that vestibule itself is probably 8 feet by 8 feet with doors. The one thing that I will say, and perhaps it's not rendered as effectively in the floor plan, is that the proposal has a tremendous amount of openness within the middle of the space. And what will be the challenge is to make sure that our check-in and our administrative area provides a welcoming environment upon entry. So the areas that are kind of in the middle of the space, in the middle of the corridor, it's our objective is to have that, in addition to the corridor, have our breakout space and our occasional seating feel like it's all part of the same room, part of our core center of the building.
Okay,
But
could I, just one more question
your point's
on the
well taken.
vestibule.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mo.
It looks like there's plenty of room there to make a bigger entrance. I know it might meet code in that, but it just seems that if there's room there, that to make it 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 just would make, it just seems like it would make more sense than for the main entrance to be that small. And having worked in an environment with people at disabilities and that, if you could go back and look at that and see if it could be made bigger, I would appreciate it. It just seems too confining to me, given what I know about people with mobility issues trying to get around. So just a thought.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you. Your point's well taken.
Very good. Thanks, Mo.
Mr. Pitney, I apologize, but I'm going to bail out right now, and I will join you again in hopefully 10 or 15 minutes if time allows.
Okay, thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
Mr. Pitney, I have a question for or Matt. This is Holly.
Sure, Holly, go ahead.
I was just wondering, the far wall with the main hall room for the senior center, could that possibly be like a slider or glass or maybe a bigger open door or area? Because I believe in your other plan, it said something about an outside seating area behind. Was that true, or is that in the front now?
That is in the front. That's proposed to be in the front of the building. But if your question is, can we make modifications to the exterior building envelope to provide a more open means of egress or occasional use from the inside to the outside, whether it be glazing or actual doors, yes, we can do that within the building envelope, yes.
Very good. Thanks, Holly. Anything else out there? I haven't heard anything on town hall. Any questions regarding town hall?
Pat,
No.
I do have
Go ahead,
one. Thank you. I do, maybe I missed it, but it didn't look like there was a lot of meeting space in that building. Did I miss it?
In the town hall?
Yep, we're on town hall now, Matt. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, let me go to that plan. Like I said, we're gonna discuss this in more detail at the next one, but to your question, meeting space was one of the primary program factors that we were exploring, and it's one of the major deficiencies within the town hall itself at the moment. Currently, there's a small meeting room here, and then basically the selectmen's meeting room, and then there's a medium-sized meeting room down here. We're increasing the number of meeting spaces within the town hall and within the campus. If you recall, at the police station, we are adding those 2 conference rooms on the lower level there. We're also adding a subdividable conference room here. This would be the potential for 2 additional conferencing spaces once it's subdivided, or 1 large conference space as well. There will be a conference room as part of the school department. We are adding a conference room for the town manager right here, 1 for the treasurer, and then this small meeting space would remain as well. Oh, I'm sorry, then another small meeting space over here by the assessor's office. So what currently is only 1 small conference room and 2 large meeting rooms. We're adding 5 or 6. Building alone.
Pat, if I could follow up, please.
Sure, Mo. Go ahead.
There were numerous times when the selectmen's room and what we call the old selectmen's room are used at the same time in the evening. I'm not seeing a space that compensates for using the old selectmen's room and putting the assessor in there. Anything that's big enough to replicate that space. I understand the smaller conference rooms are good for meetings to the staff and such, but I'm thinking public meeting space, larger spaces. I'm not seeing it. I think it looks like we're getting more meeting space, but for public meeting, it looks like we've gone backwards, unless I'm missing something.
So the intent was the old selectmen's room function would be replicated here. It's shown the 2 sets of tables in the folding partition, but if you would imagine this is one, maybe with a training room layout or a classroom layout, this would replace that function. It's not exactly the same size. We're constrained on existing space. The assessors fits much better where the old selectmen's room was, but this would essentially achieve that function for after-hour meeting space for the public.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to tell without dimensions. It's a big building, so thank you.
Mr. Penny, Kevin Mizikar, can I just add
Sure,
a
Kevin.
couple things on that? And I know we're going to dive in a little bit more on the design. And one of the things that we did ask Tecton to do is to get staff out of non-windowed spaces. So that's why you'll see a push to have conference spaces in the interior hallways and staff offices on the exterior of the building. The assessor's office is currently a challenge, but one of the other things that I think Tecton did a good job with is that the main entryway off the police station there's a number of conference and meeting room spaces there that are separate and independent from the secure area of the police department. So since we have overlapping staff and cleaning crews on the municipal campus existing, we'll be able to use the front of the police station for office space in the evenings without any additional, really requirements as far as management of it, because it'll be into a secured area just like the town hall is. So I just wanted to add those two things. That's it.
And as I recall, the large meeting room at the police station holds up to 50 people?
That's correct. Well, more than 50 people, but yes.
More than 50 people, okay. And that would be available to for any group that needed that kind of space?
Yep, that's correct.
Very good. Very good. Anything else out there? So Matt, I assume, as we move along, we'll get into more detail on each section of each building. Is that the kind of the process? This is my first building committee, so.
Yeah, so right now we're just sort of going from where we've been, and then from there, it'll be a little bit more discussion of where we're going, and it's really going to be getting ready for town meeting, getting plans and design that you all approve. Beyond that, which the various departments have weighed in on. So from here, we'll start looking at the town hall and police station additions, those massings, the design of the exterior of those, how that character fits in with the campus. And then we'll start developing our budgets and running our estimates. From there, we all take a deep breath once we get the price tag. And we either trim the fat, or it's a number that everybody's comfortable with, and we move forward.
Very good. Actually, I do have one more question on the dispatch area, and just kind of the whole computer setup. Everything I assume is going to be wired to the latest to 5G, so that when we move into that capability, that we have that.
Yeah. Actually, you'll actually have a what's called a BDA system within the or a number of different systems, but yeah, it'll have all the latest technology and then some in there with room for expansion.
Okay, because I think that's really important that we don't set it to today's standard, and then we're trying to rework the system or try and make improvements 5 years down the road when technology changes.
Right, and that's why that communications equipment room is so large. Your average school may have a similar size server, even though this building is significantly smaller. There will be miles of Cat 6 cable in that building because of all the technology and security systems and things like that. So room for expansion is something we know that we need to provide for, because a lot of police stations that you're seeing that are being torn down and rebuilt are 20 to 30 years old, which is too soon to be doing a new one of these over again. Mm-hmm. Because policing in the way these buildings operated 20 or 30 years ago has changed so significantly with the way technology has changed and the way policing has changed that you couldn't have anticipated it. And those police stations were done the same way they were done for the past 40 or 50 years, with small upgrades and modifications. So there wasn't an idea that a paradigm shift that we've had over the past 25 years would have occurred. So you couldn't plan for that. But now that we can recognize that kind of shift may happen again, that now we have more foresight into understanding what we need to plan for to allow for that future growth.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation. I guess that brings us to setting the meeting schedule. I'm going to ask Mr. Mizikar to weigh in. What do you think, Kevin? Are we every other week now, or should we be going every week? Where are we in the timeline?
My vision for the committee is ultimately to get on a monthly schedule. But I think that maybe another 2-week meeting, but I'll let others and Kristen chime in on thoughts on that, to get kind of, as Matt just said, caught up to where they are in the design process. And as I say that, I just, for those of you who haven't been involved in a building committee, there's years of, not years, but months and months of design work ahead. So plenty of time to ask questions, you know, like you did this evening, which is great. So thank you for doing that. I would either have Kristen opine or Matt jump in on frequency of next meeting in order to get on that monthly schedule.
Yeah, Matt, could you just stop sharing your screen for 1 second? I just want to make sure we're cognizant of people will probably be watching on TV. So thank you so much. I would think that if we could meet in 2 weeks or less, that would be good, just because we'd like to get the initial concepts that we've been talking about for the town hall and answer some more of those detailed questions. I know Jeff from Tecton is leading that process, so we may need to get some dates from him. But I think perhaps if we, did 2 weeks or less in this next meeting and then went to monthly after that, that may be most appropriate.
So less than 2 weeks would bring us to July 10th, 9, 10, 11. I don't have a calendar in front of me.
So the 10th and 11th, the 10th is a Friday and 11th is a Saturday.
Well, that I don't think that'll work for everybody.
So perhaps we could shoot for, and Alex might be able to do a doodle poll for the 9th or the 13th, which is a Monday.
Okay.
I'm not sure what people's vacation schedules start getting into in July if people are going away.
Alex, is that something that we can do?
Yep, I can send that out first thing tomorrow morning to see if those dates work.
Okay, why don't we look at those 2 dates? If neither of those work out, then we'll adjust from there. All right. Anything else, everybody? No? Then can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Kristen Lass.
Do I have a second?
Second, Mo DiPaolo.
Thank you, Mo. We have motion and second dismissed. Roll call vote. Mo?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Justine?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
And Pat, myself, aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.